Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It is FBC Radio Live. Excuse me. It is Thursday, January, 25th, 26th, something like that. Yeah. Well, we're about ready for championship weekend. I think we're all kind of anxious for these games to get started, and just a matter of time before they both get kicked off. And I think we're going to get a couple pretty good ones. But John, before we get to that, a couple things. First, the Chargers have a new head coach. Oh yeah. Jimmy Harbaugh is back.
I thought you were going to say Jimmy Hoffa for a second there.
Well, hey, I don't know. Maybe. Don't know where he is. They ever find him? Was it really him?
Jersey.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I don't know if I believe that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but, when it comes to crazy, wild things, I'll believe it. But no, look, obviously Jim Harbaugh, I think everyone anticipated him kind of making that jump back to the NFL this season. Stock couldn't have been any higher coming off a national championship. Again, I mean, he's like the Harbaughs or not, he's had success at every stop that he's had, whether it's Stanford or San Francisco or here in Michigan. I know you've mentioned it before, and you brought up the fact that, his flaw is probably, he's kind of got a shelf life in terms of how long you can work with him. And look, hey, I understand it. I was kind of the same way with a lot of my jobs when I was younger. There's a certain point where it's like, hey, I was a great worker. I was really good at what I did. But after a while, it's just like, you know what? I'm done with it. I'm conflicting a little bit with other people. And that's kind of what happened with Jim Harbaugh on his way out of San Francisco. So he has now been tasked with the job of, I don't want to say developing. I want to say saving Justin Herbert in this Chargers team, who, before you comment, John, I want to nip this in the butt now because I'm done calling them the most talented team in the NFL. All right, we do it every single year. We sit there and we say, "Oh, the Chargers, they're the most talented team. Are they going to put it together this year?" That's all hype. Until I see it, I'm not going to sit there and continue to call them the most talented team because, quite frankly, we haven't seen it, John. So, yeah, I mean, is Jim Harbaugh the one to finally bring all that talent out and actually have it come out on the football field?
Well, I mean, he's going to a 5-win team that does have a good quarterback, has some talent. I mean, I don't think their roster is bottom third. Maybe it's middle of the road. The thing with the Chargers is they have so many high-end players, right? You've got a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. You've got two really good receivers, an outstanding running back, a couple of top-shelf offensive linemen. You got Khalil Mack on defense and Derwin James and Bosa. You've got like 6 or 7 players who you could say are Pro Bowl caliber players. Well, you need to fill out the roster a little bit more than that because, you play 22 guys and then a lot more in sub packages. So I think what Harbaugh does, and like we both talked about previously, he does kind of wear people out after a while. That can work in college because you're constantly turning over the talent, especially with, transfers and NIL. And I also think that the college jobs have become more difficult than the pro jobs. You literally, you're constantly recruiting, and you're not only recruiting new players, you're recruiting your own players to stay there.
Right.
And there's a lot to do with that, right? So I think that this is kind of a step back to go into the NFL. There's still a lot of pressure because in college you tend to last a little bit longer, especially a guy who just won the national championship. But I think the money with the Chargers is going to be better than what he was offered with Michigan, which was 6 years, $69 million, which is $11.5 million a year. I'm assuming this 5-year deal he signed with the Chargers is for in the $16 to $18 million range. I mean, that's what Sean Payton got. In fact, he got even more money than that. Belichick, if he gets hired by someone who's going to make in excess of $20 million. Harbaugh's a top flight coach. I'm a big fan of his. Again, he does kind of wear people out, but the Chargers need something, right? I mean, they're not even the most popular team in their own city in terms of football. They fall way behind the Rams, who actually fall behind the Raiders. I mean, make a case the Chargers are like the 6th or 7th most popular football team in Los Angeles. This does give them a jolt, makes them relevant, because their coaches in the last decade and a half have been really not good coaches and not even like charismatic figures.
Well, look, I think Brandon Staley directly cost them a lot of opportunities to succeed. I mean, we go back a couple of years ago, that game against the Chiefs, a game that they I don't want to say they should have won, but they could have won if not for a couple boneheaded decisions, which ultimately cost them basically the division, a playoff. It just had so many. It was a domino effect there, John, and I think that's happened more often than not, or more times than I can remember when it comes to the Chargers. So yeah, I think this certainly is a big jolt, and quite frankly, I mean, yeah, you have the quarterback to compete in the division. I want to. I think the hype has died down a little bit for Justin Herbert because look, obviously, we're both fans of his, but at a certain point, he's gonna have to put it all together, like, and with the individual success and the winning. You know what I mean? You can only,
Mhm.
and I know this sound, it might be unfair, and like I don't think he's gotten certainly a perfect situation, but at a certain point, John, elite quarterbacks, if he is one, they sort of overcome these things, and it doesn't mean that
Mhm.
they still win 13, 14 games with subpar teams. No, but you don't lose. You don't win 4 or 5 games a year. So it's I don't know. It's weird. I want to see Justin Herbert succeed. I'm still giving him an opportunity. Not that my opinion really matters, but you know what I mean. In my mind, I'm still giving him a bit of a leash, but the leash is a bit shorter. I mean, at a certain point, we're not going to be sitting there saying, "Oh, well, they have a quarterback. Let's see what they can do." It's like, well, do they have a quarterback, or is he? I mean, I don't want to say is he Philip Rivers like it's a negative thing, but like Philip Rivers was really good. That's, I mean, what else am I going to say about Philip Rivers? You know what I'm saying? Like he was a really good
Mhm.
quarterback, but he never. They had that one season in 2006 where it was set up for them to go to the Super Bowl, all that stuff. Um, Other than that, they were always just a talented team. John, I don't know what it is about San Diego slash Los Angeles. Talent, 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 talent. All this talent. Um, never the ability to put it all together, and I think that's again a combination of a lot of different things. But it's, like I said, if they had a better quarterback, maybe that overcomes some of those things. But is that a little unfair for Justin Herbert? Am I kind of jumping off the bandwagon a
Well,
little early?
no, I think the guy's very talented and he's tough. He's played through injuries. He's been productive, although his production has gone down every single year since he's played, which is alarming. In terms of Philip Rivers happened to play in the AFC when you had Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger. Those were the three best quarterbacks in the AFC. He always would fit in at number 4 or number 5, and that's where the Chargers oftentimes fell. They did make it to the AFC Championship game in 2007, and he played with that injured knee and was valiant in that 21-12 loss to the Patriots. But he was just behind those guys, right? And you want those elite quarterbacks to kind of push the team over the edge and get them into the end zone, no pun intended. And we're seeing that now in the AFC, right? Because in terms of the hierarchy in the AFC, it's what? Mahomes, Allen, Lamar Jackson. Those are the three guys you think of right off the top of your head. Now you've got CJ Stroud, who's, a rising star in the league. There's a bunch of other really good quarterbacks. Herbert falls behind those guys, I
Yeah.
would think. Although CJ Stroud, again, let's give him a chance to show us growth in year 2. But the top 3 quarterbacks in the AFC are Mahomes, Allen, and Lamar Jackson, and then you go from there. So does he have the talent to get up there? Probably. Again, he's been hurt by poor coaching. I
Mhm.
mean, Patrick Mahomes, as great as he is, has Andy Reid. Buffalo has a pretty good structure, although they come up short quite a bit. Lamar Jackson has John Harbaugh. So now that Justin Herbert has Jim Harbaugh, he should be able to grow and get the most out of his ability.
Yeah, and again, if you're a Herbert fan and a Chargers fan, you hope that's the case. And look, I mean, I think the hill that Philip Rivers had to climb in the AFC was a little bit tougher than it is right now. I think you look across the landscape the last couple of years, and it's like, well, Lamar Jackson was hurt last year. Joe Burrow was hurt this year. Joe Burrow was hurt a couple years. You know what I mean? It's like it's kind of a watered down conference. In
I
that,
disagree. I mean, I know these guys haven't accomplished
well,
everything yet, but they're all so young. and they're kind of growing, and we've got to give them a little chance.
Yeah, but that is part of it though, because like even if you think about when when Brady comes into the AFC, obviously Peyton Manning had already been playing for a couple years. You had some other AFC the Rich Gannons of the world, guys that had been around, veterans. Rich obviously won an MVP in 2002. So there were established guys where, like right now, I mean, Patrick Mahomes is the old guy, and he's been that way really since Tom Brady left the conference. I mean, think about it, and he's right? So when I say it's maybe watered down is a little bit too negative. I don't mean it like in an overly negative way, but if you're going to ask me the landscape of the AFC in 2005 versus right now, well, you know, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Ben Roethlisberger, which I think only Patrick Mahomes deserves to be in the conversation with those guys of the AFC. Right. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying here.
Well, okay, so Roethlisberger was very young at the time, but
he was very good. He was Josh Allen, but better, John. I mean, I think people remember, Ben Roethlisberger as the guy with like the 16 pounds of ice on his shoulders, walking to training camp. I think that's the last image most people have of him.
In his prime, he was outstanding.
Exactly. So, and I think he did all those things that Josh Allen did, but I also think he was just better at it, and he won. Which at the end of the day, though, it's kind of a cautionary tale for Josh Allen because, well, again, a lot of people remember Ben Roethlisberger towards the end of his career, where at times he was still great, but he was injured a lot and kind of broken down, and it affected his game. But that three at the top of the AFC for 10 years. I mean, that's. I mean, again, it's a lot better than what it is now. And again, I'm not trying to say it as these guys suck now. It's just you're talking about, first of all, two of the three greatest quarterbacks of all time in Brady and Manning. You have Ben Roethlisberger, and then, like I said, you get to that second tier where you're talking about Joe Flacco and Phillip Rivers and oh God, who am I thinking about? I'm missing someone key, and I apologize there. So, but,
I mean, Carson Palmer was really good.
Oh, sure, yeah, Carson Palmer.
He was good. Yeah, no, but I mean, I think these guys too. I guess because they're all kind of in the same age group, we're seeing them develop at the same time. Where that was more staggered, obviously, at Manning, then Brady, then Roethlisberger, and then Rivers, and it just kind of had a staccato effect. Whereas with what we see now, it's like they're all these young guys.
Yeah.
So and they all kind of play differently, and Lamar is different than anybody that played then. I think Josh Allen and Ben Roethlisberger is a pretty good comp. They're both big playmakers, tough to take down. Let's play it out a little bit longer, obviously. Again, I keep bringing up Peyton Manning, and I think Peyton Manning was a great quarterback. That's certainly top 5 of the Super Bowl era. But again, he didn't make it to the Super Bowl till his 9th season. He didn't win a playoff game till his 6th season. So, again, I know everybody was on Lamar Jackson because he hasn't played well in the postseason. We'll see if he wins Sunday. He gets to a Super Bowl quicker than Peyton Manning got to a Super Bowl. But those quarterbacks you mentioned, that's who dominated the AFC for 10, 12 years. That's who went to the Super Bowl every year, right?
Yeah.
Brady, Manning, and Roethlisberger, and then you sprinkled in a Joe Flacco appearance in 2012, which is pretty amazing.
And I will say this too about, honestly, one of the reasons why Peyton Manning didn't make it to the Super Bowl until he did was because of Tom Brady and the Patriots. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, that's one of the key reasons why, and it wasn't a coincidence that it took them getting
and himself though, because he
sure. No. Oh, yeah. No, definitely. I mean, and that again, that's one of the reasons why, for all the great things that Peyton Manning did in the regular season, 5 MVPs, all that stuff, it's those shortcomings in the playoffs. And I know people will look at the big picture numbers, and yes, maybe he had great certain rounds, or like, in some cases, some quarterbacks do very well in the wild card and divisional round. Good for them. Conference championship, not so much.
And I know you're talking about Aaron Rodgers.
Well,
yeah.
I was trying. I wasn't even going to bring his name up, John. I wasn't even going to bring it. I was trying to help.
The AFC, by the way, he's now an AFC quarterback.
Oh yeah, I keep forgetting.
Come back and be.
I keep forgetting.
Could be in line for comeback player of the year for sure, right?
Well, if the Jets if the Jets players had their vote, I'm sure they would have done it this year. Because didn't they vote him the most inspirational? And I'm like,
he certainly was.
Okay.
Yep. He was very inspirational.
Maybe so. But
you look at Peyton Manning, and again, I'm not here to bash Peyton Manning. Like I said, certainly one of the 5 best quarterbacks of the Super Bowl era. His career record in the postseason was 14-13.
Oh yeah.
And he needed 3 wins in 2015 when, look, he was good getting to the Super Bowl. He was good against the Patriots in that AFC Championship game. Really was. Made enough throws to win that game. Right.
Well, and I think his presence was the biggest factor. Exactly. And like I even said that, like, that was about the only game where, like, was he great, Peyton Manning? No, but it's just there was something about it. I mean, So I get what you're saying.
But he needed to go 3-0 in that postseason to end up with a winning record of 14-13. So, and now you got Patrick Mahomes, who's 13-3. So if Mahomes wins Sunday, he'll have as many career playoff wins as Peyton Manning. So he's obviously the measuring stick of quarterbacks in the AFC and, quite frankly, the entire NFL. I mean, he's kind of just lapped the field in terms of accomplishments, right? 2 Super Bowl wins, 2 MVPs. But we'll see. If Lamar breaks through on Sunday, gets to the Super Bowl and lights it up, then he becomes that guy that you go, well, he's in that discussion too, right?
Well, and that's why, and I got a little heat on Twitter, I guess, or Twitter. Yeah, I'm not calling it, but me just a little bit, But I say it's too early to compare Brady and Mahomes in terms of the GOAT talk or baby GOAT. I think all that stuff's foolish because there exists a Dan Marino regular season career and 5 Super Bowl wins between the 2 players, which, I mean, quite frankly, it's an astronomical gap, which, despite how great Mahomes has been, it's still, in my eyes, just not really an appropriate conversation. But you bring up Peyton Manning, and now all of a sudden, this is where these conversations should be going. It's
and I think they have for the most part. There are some outliers.
It's very, very, very heavy towards Brady, and it really always comes back to Brady. And I think, like I said, I don't think Brady's name should even be mentioned at this point because, again, the bar set was so much higher than the last guy and it's still a gap. Like, again, the gap that exists right now would have been currently or previously enough to ascend that person to probably the greatest quarterback of all time over Montana. You know what I mean? That's how big of a difference it is. So to me, I just don't think it doesn't mean I think Patrick Mahomes sucks or anything out that. I know a lot of people interpret it that way, but no, it just means let him climb that ladder. And that ladder includes now having conversations about Peyton Manning, because you can sit there and say, oh, well, look at these playoff victories. Peyton Manning has 5 MVPs. He did this, this, and this. Patrick Mahomes did this, this, and this. He has 2 titles or 3 titles. You know what I mean? So I think those are the interesting conversations, not well, he's on pace. He's on pace to what? How are you on pace to win 5 more Super Bowls? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. So, forget about that conversation. Let's start having the more appropriate conversations, and that is with some of these guys that have won 3 Super Bowls or 2 Super Bowls and multiple MVPs, which there's not too many of them. So again, it's like back in the day, John, when I used to call Aaron Rodgers the modern day Steve Young, and Packers fans would lose their hats because they think I was insulting Aaron Rodgers. And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? I thought that was a compliment, but unfortunately people want to hear that Patrick Mahomes is the best, or all he has to do is just exist and he'll become the best. It's like, no, there's no, what you've done currently, there's no guarantee of future success. And as great as Patrick Mahomes has been earlier in his career, one of the great things about Brady was he got better until he pretty much retired. And that's something that was really kind of, it's rare, John. It's rare. Mm-hmm. I mean, part of that was his the transition from one era of football to another. It allowed him to do certain things that otherwise maybe he couldn't. I'm not saying he wouldn't, but I'm saying, yes, obviously, if the rules were the same as they were from the first 5 years of his career, the entire 20 years that he played, yeah, maybe his numbers wouldn't be as robust because, well, the offenses are surely open. But that's the point. Like, to me, I'm not saying they don't matter, but just because, say Patrick Mahomes, and this is the response I got quite a bit, just because his, numbers are better through the first 7 seasons of their career, that doesn't necessarily move me because, well, again, you're talking about 20-year difference essentially between two different starts and kind of that grouping of seasons. So it's a lot of it's a lot of nuance. So like, I know, and this is something I know that drives you nuts is Chiefs fans like to scoff at John Elway. You mentioned Elway, they're just going to laugh at you. But you and I both know, you especially more than I, because you obviously watched him more. He was a guy that was ahead of his time. The numbers obviously are not going to stack up, quote unquote, to what we see in the modern day. But to think he was any less of a quarterback because of that is foolish. So I think there are far more appropriate and fun conversations to have that don't involve constantly saying, well, Mahomes is on pace to be the GOAT. If anyone can do it, he can do it. Where he's at right now, you can say the same thing about just about any quarterback in the league, and that includes people that don't have a Super Bowl right now. Because in theory, yes, Josh Allen could go out and win the next 8 Super Bowls, John. It could happen. It sounds ridiculous, yeah? Okay. Not that much more ridiculous than winning 5 more at this point or 6 more. So it's
well, at least one guy has started the
sure
that,
but
that makes it different.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like yeah, it's great. You're oh man, I thought in my mind it didn't really formulate into a complete sentence, but in my mind I had this great space analogy about traveling to the moon versus traveling to Mars. You know what I mean? The distance difference. Like, it seems massive to get to the moon, and it takes forever, but I don't know, John. It sounded so much better in my head.
That much more difficult.
Yeah, it's just the distance gap is like as big of a difference of Josh Allen to Patrick Mahomes as there is. It's so much more between him and Tom Brady, and that's the point I'm trying to hammer home to some people. And it doesn't mean that I think Patrick Mahomes stinks or he sucks or he's this, he's that. It's like, I think he's a great quarterback. I just don't think he's as good as Tom Brady, or I don't think his career or his projections, like, I just don't think you can project that far in the future. This game isn't like that. And John, there's a, like I said before, Brady got better. And again,
right,
there was factors that were involved with that. Obviously adding some extra talent around. There's no doubt that his start of his career didn't have the explosive players around him, but obviously the era. But who knows, John? We may have seen the best of Patrick Mahomes, and maybe he still has a really good career, but maybe he doesn't elevate from here. And if that's the case, there's a chance that he doesn't reach those numbers, the numbers that people just think he's going to sleepwalk to. So I think that's my issue.
Well, I saw this in baseball, and we talked about it before. Mike Trout was on pace to surpass Barry Bonds.
Right.
So, his first 6-7 years in the league, well, if you just triple that, because Bonds played 22 years,
right.
If you just triple what Trout had after 7 years, he would hit 800 home runs, drive in 2,100 runs, and win 9 Gold Gloves. Just take what he did in his first 6-7 years and triple it. Well, the last 5 or 6 years, his play has decreased, partly because of injuries, partly because it's not easy to play at that level,
right.
Especially in that sport, right? And the same thing in football, because as great as Mahomes and Brady and all these great quarterbacks are, they do need something around them, right? So, if Kansas City can't draft the talent that's necessary, is it going to be difficult for him to continue to show up in the AFC Championship game? Yeah, there's going to be some slip-ups, I'm sure, as there were with Brady. I mean, I always bring up that Brady went 9 years without winning a Super Bowl, and yet still managed to finish with 7 of them. That, to me, is incredibly remarkable. He did go to 2 in that 9-year stretch, but he never won one, and it's just like he still ended up with 7. That is what really blows my mind.
Well, and at this point, like, moving forward, so Patrick Mahomes is 28. He's going to be 29 at the start of the next season. He'd need to average 5,000 yards a season for the next 12 years just to match Tom. That would bring him to 41, which, again, people are like, oh, of course. Well, let's again, assuming
we don't know.
Right, exactly. And it's like, there's a lot of other factors. Like his legs aren't, like, one of the great things about Brady was that obviously he wasn't a running quarterback, and that allowed, like, his legs didn't fail him later in his career, like we see a lot of guys who are running quarterbacks have that happen to them because it's just part of the game. It's the physical nature of it. So is he always going to have that extra extra bit of whatever you want to call it in his legs the rest of his career? Well, maybe not. And like, what happens if Travis Kelce retired? I mean, we just saw a season this year, which, I mean, it may end up in a Super Bowl, John. They may end up winning the Super Bowl, but 4,100 yards, 27 touchdowns, and this is all, if you ask Chiefs fans, because they had subpar talent. Well, do you expect him to have all-star talent the rest of his career? Well, no. And if that's the case, like I said, I mean, he has to average, John, 5,000 passing yards a season for the next 12 years just to tie. So at what point, like how much do you think, and this is a conversation that I just never even get into with Chiefs fans because it's not, or some Chiefs fans, because it's just, it's pointless because they're never going to appreciate the nuance. But how much, what would be if Patrick Mahomes beats Tom Brady's yard mark by 50 yards, is that going to move you? You know what I mean? Like what at what point?
No, it's not the home run record. Like,
right.
And now that's been soiled, obviously. But yeah, it's not the home run record. Like you knew 714 was Ruth and 755 was Aaron. I mean, people know that Bonds was 762 because he was so
polarizing
by,
and
yeah, say the least. Polarizing is the best word to use to describe him because like 99.4% of the people despise him, and then there's 0.6% of us that love him.
And so, we're two of those 6 or 0.6%.
0.6%, right? Yeah, you got to find the other ones that make that add up. But it's not a number that, like, I don't know what Tom Brady. You probably do know what Tom Brady's yards were, excluding the postseason, just in the regular season. It's in the 80,000 range.
89,000. So it's a 60 right now. Mahomes is at like
90,000.
Yeah. So the difference is 61,000. So like I said, I mean, it's literally Dan Marino's career and 430 some odd touchdown difference.
Right. No, it's probably not. That's not going to happen. Now, if he wins 6 Super Bowls, 7 Super Bowls, then the conversation's there.
Oh, sure, the conversation's there. But again, I mean, and this was kind of my point and why the bar is so high. Like Brady retired literally as the league leader in passing yards, touchdowns, and wins in both the regular season and postseason. And the postseason was by a wide margin. I mean, we're not talking about a couple. And kind of the same with the regular season numbers. And people will sit there and say, oh, well, just counting stats for playing so long. Well, that's kind of part of it. You know what I mean? And then I also think there's, and this is why, again, you can't project and you can't, have these conversations right now. It's his ability to excel late and in his 40s. I don't think gets talked about. It gets talked about a lot, John, but not enough.
Right.
Like people are just like, oh, of course he did that. Well,
no, but you know what's a fun experiment to do, and I did this a decade ago with Brady and Manning. People would say, well, Manning was Will Chamberlain and Brady was Bill Russell, and I looked at their stats, and actually Brady's average yearly stats were better than Peyton Manning in terms of, yards, touchdowns, the interceptions, the ratio. So he's got 89,000 yards in the regular season. He played 21 years, so let's say it's 4,400, 4,500 per year. Is Mahomes average that? Probably right around there, right? So Brady put up the same number of yards per year as Mahomes, and again, he did it, especially early in his career, was a little more slanted to the defense. And you say he has 800 and so many touchdowns?
Well, the difference between total touchdowns is 430, which was more than Dan Marino had in his career.
So he's gonna have to average 30. Well, going on a 12-year basis, you're talking 35, 36 touchdowns per year. He just had 27 this year.
Yeah.
So, my point being that Brady's average years were still phenomenal. It's not like the guy just hanging around for 10 years and then it exploded.
These averages are taken into account a 17-game season too, so there's an extra game involved with this.
Right. Yeah. And again, the good thing about these two guys, durable. Brady did miss the one season, but other than that, the guy always answered the bell. And Mahomes, durable as well. I mean, he's missed 1 or 2 games, really one game with that knee, which he miraculously came back from. I think the guy, they're both kind of freakish in that sense, right?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
They're both kind of wired the same way too. They're ultra competitive. They lead. They're more alike than people want to give them credit for.
No, I think they're they're very much alike. And like I said, I mean, I've never said, and this is the crazy, and this is why I love that tweet that someone, I shared it earlier. Someone a while back was like, Twitter's the only place where like you can say something completely articulate, and someone said like, I like pancakes, and the response is, so you hate waffles. It's like, no, that's it's not what I said. And I run into that often because, again, when I sit there and I quote unquote defend Brady, i.e. try to level people's brains here, it's me not saying that Patrick Mahomes sucks. No, I think he's a great quarterback, and as amazing as his start is, again, it puts into perspective how great Brady was, because it's such a small chunk of what Brady did at this point. So let's forget about Brady. Forget about Brady. Let's watch
That's
Mahomes.
Be tough for you to do.
Well, everyone but me. But I mean, like in this context, let's forget about him for now. Let's watch Mahomes climb that mountain, so to speak. Not the Mahomes mountain that Nick Wright has, but I'm talking about the quarterback mountain. There's not really that many at this point. Certainly if he wins another Super Bowl in a few weeks, there's certainly not going to be that many that's going to be ahead of him. So again, but this is like the classic example of the gap between 1 and 2 is as big as the gap between 2 and like 50. You know what I mean?
So Tiger Woods was playing at
right.
prime. Remember that? Like his average round was this. The second best golfer was so far behind that it was the same gap between 2 and 22. And we saw that with Bonds, with OPS.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wayne Gretzky, right? Wayne Gretzky would score 200 points, and the next guy would have 101. So you have to go like 90 players to get to the same gap. Now you'd have defensemen with 40 points, as close to second as second was to first, which is just ridiculous. So in terms of that, if he was to go out and win the Super Bowl, I'd be very comfortable putting him at number 3. And right now I'm pretty comfortable putting it at number 5. Again, strictly speaking, the Super Bowl era. Again, Johnny Unitas, Otto Graham, Bart Starr.
Well, and that's where we'll disagree, because I will not disagree, because I do when I have because I have Unitas 4. Someone asked me this today, like kind of trying to get me in a gotcha. And like I said, I haven't even checked, but I did throw John Elway in there, and I'm sure that they lost their tops because they're a Chiefs fan. But I had
if you didn't see him play, and a lot of these Chiefs fans that you battle with are probably 32 or younger.
Yeah.
Like the guy retired 25 years ago. So unless you're 35, you follow football, you're a historian, so you know how great the guy was. But the average guy your age probably caught him at the tail end of his career when he did win back-to-back Super Bowls, and he was MVP in one of them. Yeah, and maybe I just have it emblazoned in my mind that I actually, at one point, Ian, believe it or not, was a Patriots fan.
Right.
John Elway was 7-0 against the Patriots in his lifetime. They couldn't beat him, and they had some pretty good teams.
Well,
they went to 2 Super Bowls during his career. They just couldn't beat the guy. He was that good.
And this is part of the reason why, I push back on. Like I said, this is not me saying that Mahomes sucks. It's when I push back on when people say things like, "We've never seen this before." It's like, we have, though, and it's like, if you continue to say that, then it just kind of cheapens everything else, because it's like, well, you're just lying. Like, we've seen athletic quarterbacks stylistically play the way he has, and they're like, well, have we seen him have success? I'm like, yeah, John Elway went to 5 Super. Like, what are we talking about here? We can have a
with
healthy
bad teams.
Yeah, with some really bad teams.
With bad teams, and he willed them to the Super Bowl. And then, by the way, they lost to the '86 Giants, an all-time great team. The '87 Redskins, who were in the midst of winning 3 Super Bowls in like an 8-9 year period, they were outstanding. And then the '89 49ers, I can make a case for the greatest team ever.
Sure. Yeah.
They went 14-2, and they just blew through the playoffs. It was a joke. I think their backups could have won the Super Bowl. That's who he faced in his first 3 Super Bowls. I'll be quite honest with you. I don't know of any quarterback that could have beat those 3 teams, because his defense was giving up 55 against San Francisco, 42 against Washington, and 39 against the Giants. Like, how do you overcome that?
Yeah,
it's maybe Brady could have found a way against Washington. I don't know. But that's a lot to ask for the quarterback. Then when he finally got a running game and a decent defense, he won back-to-back Super Bowls.
Yeah, and so again, the discourse about Elway, it kind of depends on what fan base you're talking to. But the point is like, yes, he was athletically gifted. Yes, he's made plays like that. And like I in my, I did a top 10 list about a year and a half ago, which, probably could be a little bit tweaked. Certainly if like I said, Patrick Mahomes wins another Super Bowl this week or this month or whatever in a few weeks. But I said, John Elway was a guy who was just kind of ahead of his time. I mean, if he was playing in the league now, you know what I mean? Like it's just
he's a better version of Josh Allen. He had all that physicality
oh yeah,
in the arm. Much brighter player, like better leader, much more careful with the football. He would be right there with Mahomes as the best quarterback in football without question. The guy was phenomenal. I just wish people would at least appreciate his career and just don't give me the passer ratings and all that other stuff.
Right. Well,
he only won one MVP. That was at a time where running backs were winning MVPs.
Right. Exactly. And it's like, and that's what I'm saying. Like if people did have these appropriate conversations of Mahomes climbing the ladder, then Elway would be appreciated because he would be one of those notches that he would pass or have to pass. Because it's like, can you make an art like here? Because here's the thing. This is how fickle this is. How sensitive this is, John. If the Chiefs go out and get blown out against the Ravens, what are we even talking about here? That, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay,
well, I mean,
that's what.
What we're talking. I mean, now he's 13-4 in the postseason, 6 straight AFC Championship games, 3-3 in those AFC Championship games. That's still a pretty good resume.
But it takes a. But that's what I'm saying. The implications of just losing this weekend kind of are pretty heavy because it's like, again, they're I mean, let's be honest, the Nick Wrights of the world are talking like they've already won the Super Bowl, which is kind of silly because I don't think they're going to be favored in either game that they're in.
Probably not unless they play Detroit.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll take that back. Unless Detroit somehow makes it. But so to me, I think it's a tough hill to climb. And obviously, like, you don't have to wait till tomorrow probably to get my picks because I made these picks before the season started, so I'm not going to sway from them now. But I'm going to find it a difficult challenge for them to get past the Ravens and or the 49ers. So again, it's all of a sudden you're talking about 2-2, you're 500 in the AFC Championship game, or I'm sorry, 2-1, and then you're
3-1 in the AFC Championship.
Yeah, well, I'm saying 3-3 in the AFC Championship game, 2-1 in the Super Bowl. With 2 Super Bowls are nice. These AFC Championship games are nice, but you're 500. All of a sudden, like the GOAT trajectory doesn't necessarily fit. So that's what I'm saying. It's so like let's just forget about it for now. Let his career play out because trust me, this conversation in 5-10 years from now is going to be a lot more appropriate and probably a lot more fun to have. And that includes myself because, like, John, I like greatness. Do I want to, as a Brady fan, see him be the best quarterback of all time forever? Sure. Why not? But it doesn't mean I can't appreciate greatness or accept it when it comes because, well, I'm not going to deny it, but people think I deny it, John. I don't.
You're not a denier.
I am not a denier. I am not a denier.
I mean, Brady's 10-4 in conference championship games, and by the way, he won one of them a different team.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing too. He did this with another team. He won a Super Bowl with another team, and again, I don't think it's the biggest factor, but the head-to-head in the AFC and the Super Bowl, I mean, that matters, John. That matters.
Yeah,
so, like,
2-0 against Mahomes. 2 of Mahomes' 3 postseason losses came at the hands of Brady.
Yeah.
And one of them was a blowout, the Super Bowl. There's a lot at stake for Mahomes. Again, look, 2 Super Bowls, 2 MVPs, 6 straight appearances. That's a resume that's
absolutely
really difficult to match. And again, there's legacy involved there because if he does win this 3rd Super Bowl, then I'm pretty fair with this stuff. I put him at number 3 behind Brady, Montana, and he's kind of on the heels of Montana at that point. But I think he would have cleared Manning and Elway to move into third.
I also
Super Bowl era, and that's been 6 years. That's pretty good. If he loses, then we kind of lump him in with Elway and Manning. Not a bad place to be.
Right. Well, that's what I'm
too. That's the thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying, John. Like all this stuff, we're talking about a kid who's already in the conversation of being a top 10 quarterback. But to some people, unless you're bowing to his feet and saying he's already on pace to be the GOAT and all that, then you're deemed a hater, and it's just not true. It's like, because we could sit there and you say on the heels of Montana, and that would be a fun conversation if he gets 3. I mean, I'm not going to start talking about this because then the conversation shifts to, well, I think Montana was obviously better in his Super Bowl games so far. I mean, Mahomes was really good against the Eagles, but obviously bad against the Buccaneers, and good when it mattered against San Francisco. Brady obviously has had that. Was he great against the Rams in Super Bowl in 2001? It depends on what you consider great. When he needed to be, he was. And just like Patrick Mahomes. So I'm not trying to use that as a negative, but if you're going to sit there and try to make the case over Montana, well, that loss to the Buccaneers kind of hurts Mahomes quite a bit, because it's a bad performance. And that, when you're talking about, when you get up this ladder and you start talking about these other quarterbacks, that stuff matters more, John.
Because now, I always have to be careful with this, though, because would it have been better for him if he lost that AFC Championship game to Buffalo in 2020, played a great game, and never went to the Super Bowl and lost? I still think getting to the Super Bowl and losing is better than not getting there. I don't want, because Rob Parker drives me crazy.
Right. I understand.
Montana's the greatest because he's 4-0, and Jordan's the greatest because he's 6-0, and are we going to diminish Bill Russell for
no? But this, I agree with you, and I think it is a slippery slope if you're not careful. So I appreciate you bringing that up, but I think it's because of the performance. It's not that he just lost the Super Bowl. I think it's obviously better to get to a Super Bowl as long as you're going to compete. And they just weren't competitive. And, despite what, Chiefs fans will tell you, he wasn't that good in that game. And just like the rest, the rest of the team wasn't great either. I mean, I'm not putting it all on him, but the reality of it was there's even Tom Brady's worst performance in the Super Bowl, which I'd probably say is Super Bowl 46.
The second Giants one. Yeah. He still gave them the lead late in the
game. Again, it's same thing with that the game against the first game against the Giants. I thought he was good. Not great, not bad, just good, not good enough, certainly, because they lost that game. But that's those are his quote unquote worst Super Bowl performances. And those are a lot better than what we saw from Mahomes and that Chiefs team in that game. So, again, a huge hill to climb. And
now, when we're talking about Joe Montana never threw an interception in the Super Bowl, which is pretty remarkable. Again, he was playing from in front in 3 of those games. They built up a big lead against Cincinnati.
But he also almost handed off one to the Bengals in the end zone. So it's I think that's impressive. But
before the game-winning throw.
So it's
the game-winning throw was so sweet.
It was.
My Lord.
Which I think not throwing an interception is certainly impressive. I just not to the extent people used to use that to elevate Montana. You know what I mean? I don't okay, so he didn't throw an interception, but clearly, the pass I'm talking about, this wasn't a tip off the hand. This was thrown literally right into the guy's gut, and he just didn't catch it. And it's
What people forget to talk about with Montana, look, he was my favorite quarterback of that era. Maybe the vowel at the end of the name had something to do with it.
Surprise!
If Elway didn't have that Y at the end, Elwa, then he would have been maybe even more my favorite quarterback. The thing about Montana is in those Super Bowls, his defenses, and everybody forgets the San Francisco dynasty from 1981 to 1994. And yes, that's a dynasty. They won 5 Super Bowls in a 14-year stretch. That's pretty remarkable with 2 different quarterbacks, 2 different coaches. The 49ers defenses throughout those years were outstanding. In fact, there's more Hall of Famers on the 49ers defense than on their offense. Right, yeah. So, which speaks well to Montana that he played with a good offensive line, no great offensive lineman. Jerry Rice, yes, but you also have to remember he won 2 Super Bowls before Jerry Rice showed up. Roger Craig was a great player. But in those Super Bowls, I believe in the first Cincinnati game, they gave up 21 points. One was a garbage touchdown, with 10 seconds left. That San Francisco defense held Dan Marino to 9 points in the 49ers Super Bowl win over the Dolphins. And he won the next Super Bowl 20-16. Yeah. And I believe the one touchdown the Bengals scored was a kickoff return for a touchdown. So they only got really 9 points against a really good offense. And then the next year, 55-10 over John Elway. And look, they were constantly beating MVP candidates too.
Right.
Like Kenny Anderson and Boomer Esiason were both MVPs the year that the 49ers beat them in the Super Bowl. Kind of like Brady. Brady beat a lot of MVPs too. But don't fall short on San Francisco's defense all those years. And Marino had his greatest year in '84, and they held him to 9 points.
Yeah. Well, and that's the crazy thing too, and that's why it was always so puzzling to me why people would put so much weight into Tom Brady's defenses, because it was almost kind of the opposite. Like, yeah, they they've had great moments. They played great against in that second Super Bowl against the Rams, but like those like when I say like people, the defense was really good, obviously in the first Rams Super Bowl.
The first three, yeah.
Well, individually in each game, no. I mean, Carolina game, they blew leads. I mean, they blew. John, that lead they blew against the Rams was at the time the biggest blown lead in the fourth quarter in Super Bowl history. Yeah. And they did this on kind of a regular basis. So that's why it's so funny when people sit there and say, well, the defense carried Brady. I'm like, well, do you know how many times Brady had to pull their asses out of the fire? I mean, the Carolina. Yeah. I mean, like, look, the Eagles one was as almost as clean of a victory for the Patriots, at least in Brady, in a Super Bowl, because they were up 24. They were up 24-14 late in the game and a garbage touchdown. But John. Yeah. They almost kind of gave them an opportunity to come back into it. So again, it's funny that's the discourse. But to your point, I mean, those 49ers defenses were phenomenal. They have far more players in the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's Joe Montana and Jerry Rice. That's it. Roger Craig's not in. I mean, Roger Craig should probably, or there's a good case for him to be in the Hall of Fame.
Right. But you have Ronnie Lott. Obviously, he's in the Hall of Fame. Bryant, who I think played in the '94 championship team. Mm-hmm. Also, you had Charles Haley, who played on a couple of the 49ers.
Five-time Super Bowl champion Charles Haley.
Yeah, exactly, until Tom Brady came along and surpassed him. But the funny thing, too, is, and I brought this up before, in the first 5 Patriots Super Bowls with Brady and Belichick, the Patriots defense gave up 62 fourth-quarter points in those 5 games.
That's wild.
That's 13 points per game, right? Remember, the Rams scored 14 in the first Super Bowl. Yep. Carolina scored 19 points in the fourth quarter of that Super Bowl. The Eagles scored 7, and then the Giants, I believe, had
7, right?
14.
No, yeah, you're right.
Quarter, yeah, they had 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and then 8 because they got a 2-point conversion in Super Bowl 46. So add that up, 62 points in 5 games. That's 13 points per game in the fourth quarter. This is where I use the seesaw method of Brady, Belichick. Like, Belichick's great defenses kind of collapsed in the fourth quarter of all those games. They won 3 of them, but a lot of that and most of it still had to do with Tom Brady, like you said, pulling it out for them.
Yeah, I mean that Carolina Super Bowl was one of them. It's incredible how little
entertaining Super Bowls ever.
Oh yeah,
everyone seems to have forgotten it because I think it's Carolina.
Yeah, it's right? Carolina, and it's like again, the narrative was the defense was winning championships, so they weren't talking about how great Brady was. But Brady was great. He set the record for most completions in a Super Bowl, so he did that 2 more times after that.
He had like 39 completions in that game. Some ridiculous number of completions. Yeah.
Well,
and then it was a tie game, and he set up the game-winning field goal.
Well, think about this too. Going back to 2001, and it's like people, he didn't even throw. He threw 1 touchdown that playoff one. Well, the AFC Championship game. Look, he was hurt, but somehow was still better than Drew Bledsoe. Like, everyone remembers Drew Bledsoe throwing the touchdown, and that's all well and good. But Bledsoe stunk for like that 99% of that game that he came in for. So like, I always thought it was funny that there was even a question that they would go back to him if Brady was healthy. But he threw the ball 55 times against the Raiders in his first playoff game in a blizzard, John.
In a blizzard, yeah.
In a blizzard. In game 15 of his career. Like, yep. And people like will sit there and say, "Oh, look at his passer rating, and he didn't throw a touchdown." Well, you're an idiot. I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore, John.
Yeah, you can't.
I can't.
But it's crazy. But yeah, it's great to debate all this stuff. But I think for your own sanity, the Brady discussion should be left to the side. If Mahomes wins his 3rd Super Bowl, like I said, I will make the case that he's the 3rd greatest quarterback of the Super Bowl era, and he's nudging up to Joe Montana at that point.
Yeah.
But I think he will have cleared Manning and Elway. If that's not enough for Chiefs fans, I don't know what to tell them. I really don't.
No, well, again, I mean, it isn't, unfortunately, for some. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of really level-headed ones out there. I just the nut jobs just seem to find me, John. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a more about them or more about me. I'm not too sure. So so very slippery slope there. I don't want to get into. So anyways, that's going to do it for us here today. Tomorrow, like I said, we will be back and we'll be making our picks. Like I said, you probably, if you listen to me at any point over at least the last couple months, you probably already know what my picks are going to be. But we're going to talk a bit more about each one of these games and really dive into it. So until then, have a great day, have a great afternoon, evening, and we'll talk to you in the morning.